Share my screen. See, if you ever need help making a thumbnail, Keith, I'm your guy. That is a thing of beauty.
Oh my gosh, that's brilliant. Maybe you should make an EFT out of that.
I know, right? Like, I definitely didn't work on this 30 seconds ago. It's
looking great though. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say EFT? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my own personal creation. NFT is what I was looking for.
All right, so the idea today is that we're going to go over some of the automation tips and tricks that you can do on the router or switch itself rather than having to rely on external things. So the idea is that we're going to be covering some old school stuff that probably only Keith remembers, such as TCL. We're going to look at... Yeah, like those were life savers back in the day, right? And then we're going to look at things like smart auto ports, which is something that not a lot of people talk about these days. And we're going to also have a look at templates. And then we're going to probably close the day out with guest shell. And of course, EEM for monitoring there. So we should have a fun time.
Donald, do you mind me asking a quick question regarding the last week's subject?
The VXLAN? Sure.
Yeah, if memory doesn't fail me, I think you one of the things that you were talking about the benefits of VXLANs was that we didn't need to bother too much about the broadcast domains and broadcast storms and things like that. But I was just wondering if you still have the same problem in IPv6, because things moving forward, we perhaps will, I don't know, we'll perhaps transition to IPv6, and I was just wondering if VXLANs would still be beneficial on that single point.
So if I remember what I was talking about last time there, the issue with your broadcast storm and whatnot is that it's layer 2 constructs at the end of the day. So you have your switch, and then you have your host. There we go. And the idea is that because these are in one broadcast domain, these will hear each other when they broadcast. So VXLAN will help a little bit there because the layer 2 domain ends right here, and then it gets encapsulated by the VXLAN and forwarded over. Now, I didn't talk about some of the extra complexities there. Like there's a big important feature called ARP suppression. And the idea here is that it will intelligently block all the broadcast traffic before it gets to the VXLAN, so it doesn't waste a bunch of traffic there. But long story short, you're still going to have broadcast domain issues there, but for the most part, if you do this properly and you set up all your hosts with /31 network, so there's no real broadcast, then that's how you get around that kind of thing there. If you set up your VXLAN with like a /8, so everyone's broadcasting, you're not really solving that particular problem.
Well, thanks for that.
Okay, cool. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and dive onto my devices. So there's not a lot of theory we're going to talk about. We're just going to kind of take it on a case-by-case basis. Let me just clear this. There we go. How's that look? that look alright, everyone?
Yeah, you're sharing the whiteboard, yeah?
No, I'm sharing. I should be sharing my secure CRT. Did you not see it? Let me try that again.
And with the whiteboard, I don't know if it's just.
Oh, you know what? I did the application on the screen. That's my bad. There we go. How's that?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, cool. See, this is why we ask questions before we power on. I've done more than one presentation there where everyone said, that's great, but you didn't have any visuals. Like, yes, I did. So, anyway, what we're going to do first is we're going to have a look at TCL, and we're not going to get too much into this because it's more legacy, but this is just more to let you know that this is available to you if you need it. So, let me just get organized here. The first thing we want to do is enter TCL shell, which is an old programming language that isn't really used today there, but if you're in the collaboration world or whatnot, you might still use Tickle for your call center scripting. But aside from that, this used to be handy like back in like the old CCIE lab kind of thing there because you had no real automation otherwise. So if you wanted to do a ping script, Tickle was the only way to go. All you do is you type in TCL/SH, and this is available on basically all Cisco devices there except for the firewalls. The older switches don't have it, I believe, but I think all the modern ones still do for legacy purposes. But from here, all you do is you just start typing out your shell like you would if this was Python. Now, we're not going to get too much into the syntax here, but the big ones that we care about is exec. And what this does is lets you run commands. And then you can also do puts, which is basically your print. And you can just say something like more Cisco. So with this, you can build a basic construct of a script. So what we used to do back in the day when we did the CCIE lab is that one of the requirements of the lab is you had to make sure that everything could ping each other that wasn't restricted. So what we would do is we would write up a ping script at the end, and we would make sure that all our IPs were reachable so that we had a decent indication that we're going to pass or not. So what we would do is we would do something like this. We would go for each, and we would give it like a variable name. And then we would just say something like 1, 2, and 3. And then we would just say ping address. So what this would do is it would just use the Tickle to automate the various IPs, and it would just run the commands, and there's no real fanfare there. So we could also take this a step further, and to save some typing, I'm just going to copy and paste this here because I got this all sorted out, but we're just going to go paste. And what we're going to do is the same thing, except for we're going to use some regex to basically whenever it sees the percent signs, or not percent signs, the exclamation points for the ping success, it's going to replace that with address OK or address unreachable if it's not there. So if I go paste here, we can see that we get a little bit cleaner output there, so we can see that have a better understanding if our output was good. But for the most part, this is all you need to know about Tickle scripts. There is one other useful thing that we used to do, and that was we could use this to create files. So I could do something like this. I could go puts, and then I could say open boot flash. We'll just say bad change .cfg, and then we're going to open it for writing. What we would do is we would, if we had something that we had to change an IP address on an interface, or we had to put an ACL there that's going to kill access to us, what we would do is we would enter in our commands here, and then we would load this configuration so it wouldn't disconnect us. So we could do something like interface loopback 123. And we'll just say 123, 123, 123, 123. And we'll give the description. And when we're done, we just close this. And if we look, we actually should have, I gotta go over here, tickle quit. By the way, if you're working with tickle there, if you forget to leave the tickle shell, you can get some weird command line issues there, so always quit when you're done. But if I go dir and I call this bad change, I now have this file. So if I go copy run, or copy boot flash, bad change, running config, I now have this new loopback there. So this is useful because when you type a command, like when you SSH into a router and you type commands, every line you do is sent to the router and is implemented before it does the next line there. So if I was to shut down the interface that was I was connected to, I lose my SSH session and the other commands don't get there. So the idea of this is that we use this to pre-stage the configuration, and that way we don't need to worry about it. But this is more of a legacy feature, but this will probably take Keith back to memory lane. Have you ever done this, Keith? No? Lost Keith there, apparently. But anyway, what we'll do next is move on to more modern things. And the new modern thing is something called ios.sh. And what this does is it brings a basic... Where's my... my thing's up. Anyway, it brings a basic bash shell. My stylus is messing up, so I'm doing this with my mouse here. It brings a basic bash shell functionality to the iOS there, so you can do more basic scripting and use some Linux utilities here. So what we can do is we turn this on by just saying terminal shell, and all this stuff. After this, we have our functionality. We can actually just type man. And now we get a bunch of Linux utilities that we don't normally have. So for example, I can now grep traffic, because before, if I did show IP interface brief, we would have our include, and we would have our section and whatnot, but we could never do grep. But now I could say grep down. And the benefit here is that I can chain grep together just like I can with Linux there. So if I want to, I could say grep mvlan, grep3, and I can chain these together to be much more granular than the traditional include. But aside from that, we can also use this for scripting purposes. So we can create a variable. We can do that just by saying man variable. And it'll tell us how to use this in practice. So I could say something like test IP. And then we'll just say that this is going to be Google. And then if I go ping test IP, I can now use that as a replacement. So the idea here is that we can use the shell to make things a bit more permanent than what we would typically work with. And if I wanted to take the step further, I can make a function. And the idea here is we just save some configuration that is useful to us. So if I do something like function more Cisco, and then we'll just say ping, what did I call it? Test IP. And now if I call more Cisco, actually I shouldn't use the variable there. So what I'm going to do is just call this ping, and we'll put the actual thing there, and then we'll just go close. All right, well, the function's giving me trouble, but I don't want to spend too much time on it. But, what was it? Because I could have space here. Oh, I was adding the, when you call it, you just do it without the brackets there. You just do the more Cisco. Anyway, that was just boomerang it there. So anyway, that is a simple way of doing functions and whatnot. Now, this isn't really practical in the real world unless you're doing some basic troubleshooting or you're just used to it in your workflow. The utilities are like the grep and the cutter are more useful to you. So like you could do things like the brief, and then you can say like cut, and you could use this to cut whatever you want to. And so on and so forth, but that is what we could do there. Let's see if this works. So for example, I'm just cutting the first space there, and we can see all the interfaces. And if we do like 2, 3, I'd have to do the proper output. But anyway, long story short, these utilities are useful. The function stuff, maybe not. One thing what is useful, though, is you can use a for loop, and you can use the man interface to test things out. So if I go man interface, this is just going to give us the name of all the interfaces on the system. And so what we can do is I can go echo all the interfaces, and we can see all the interfaces on this router, which isn't really that useful as it is, but you might want to add this there. But if you use this in a for loop, this is where it gets interesting. So if I say for interface, and then we'll just say do, and then we'll just say comp t. Oh, I messed something up there. Man 4. There we go. So what we'll do here is we're going to just add a description to all our interfaces. So we're just going to basically loop through all the interfaces in the interface list. And then we're going to add a description by going into enable. That's where I messed up before. I didn't. I went straight into comp t and it lost it there. So we want to do that. Then we want to say that we're going to the instance of the variable. And then we can just say whatever we want. So we can say description more Cisco. Now, very important here is you have to end this, because what will happen is that it's going to do this from the first instance of where this is in the command line. So it expects to have to enable again and go to comp t. So if you don't end it there, you're just going to have it work once and it's not actually going to go for the loop. So when we're done, we type done, and we can see that we have a bunch of interfaces configured. So if I do show interface description, we can see that now all the interfaces on my system have more Cisco on it. So you can see this could be a quick and easy way of doing configuration to get things going. So how about that? Is that it neat to anyone? Yeah, it's definitely got some functionality there. So that is most of what I wanted to talk to about iOS shell. There is one other thing. If you wanted to make this permanent, because remember I enabled it with terminal shell, but if you want, you can also go shell processing full. And this means that it's going to be always enabled for you at all times there, so you don't have to manually enable it. Now there are some consequences, like if you go under, you'll see some scripting things under certain menus or whatnot, but for the most part it's fine running. You just got to be aware of it, but very handy functionality for doing things there. The other thing that this can do is it also lets you read documents. So because it has cat, you can go boot flash and what did I call that? Bad chain CFG. So we can read documents directly there without doing anything else on the box here. So that's can be very handy. And while I'm here, it's not entirely relevant, but it'll be useful for when Kelvin talks about their other external factors. But there is an overlooked feature called format, and what this does is it basically spits out the XML for the configuration, and this can be useful for some of your automation stuff if you wanted to extract certain data. But I'll leave that for Calvin there. All right, so that is iOS shell, and that is TCL. We're going to move over to the switch, and we're just going to talk about a couple other topics that are useful.
I have a question regarding this. Would the shell also be able to read the syslog messages and run things by reading syslog messages?
That is something we're going to talk about later. That is called EEM, Embedded Event Manager, and we'll talk about that towards the end of the day.
Yeah, okay. So it's not able to do that. It's doing anything that I say.
No. This is purely just enhancing your CLI capabilities.
Yeah, I have worked with both before, but I haven't worked with the shell before and didn't know if that could read the syslog messages at all. So that's fine. Thank you.
Fair enough. All right, so on the switch, we're going to look at one that's not really automation, but is kind of overlooked, and that is templates. So a lot of us have got into the trap of going under some interfaces and entering in common configuration everywhere, and without having to and then updating it as we need to there. But iOS actually does have a template feature. So what we can do is we can go template, we're going to say interface, and you can see there's a bunch of built-in templates already. What we're just going to do is create our own. So we're just going to say that this is going to be, actually, no, we're going to create some VLANs first. We're just going to say VLAN 10 is going to be name data. VLAN 20 is name phone. And I don't know, VLAN 30 is AP. Why not? Oop. Name AP. So we're going to create a template, and we just give it a name. So we're just going to say interface template, whatever. And in here, all we do is we enter in our configuration. So we can say template we can say that this is going to be an access port. And then when we get to the VLANs, we do have a new option here. So we can enter in the IP address or the number like we always do, but because this is a template, we can reference it by the name. So I can say name, and I can say that this is data because I think I called that, yeah, data. And then for the voice VLAN, I can say name is going to be phone. And this does test it, by the way. If I type in something there, it's going to say I don't know what that is. So enter in phone there. And we can enter in all the configuration we want to there, like if we want to do port security or whatever we want to do. And when we're done, all we do is we go to our interface. We'll just pick 5 here. And no, 15. Pick 15, why not? And all we do is, if we look, there should be nothing on here. Yep, it's just shut down. So what we're going to do is we're going to go source, template, and we just pick the name. And you notice that it actually has the name here so that we can figure out what we have on the system. We don't have to guess and reference the configuration. So if I do this, and I look at the port, we can see that we have the port reference, or the template reference rather, but we don't see any of the VLAN stuff. And the reason why is we have to use another command, do show derived config, interface 15, and then we can see the actual configuration on the device there. So on one hand, we get an easier look at or an easier configuration because we just put one line for all our devices and we can update it as we need to. But on the other hand, if we look at the ports and you're not familiar with templates there, you can see how that can lead to some confusion. So that's templates. It is available on routers too, by the way, so I could do the same thing here. I can go template and I can say interface and whatever we want to do, and I can enter in any router specific things there, but it's usually more handy on the switches. Lost my train of thought there. I will point out one here. If I go IP address, you can see that it's basically forcing you into DHCP there because obviously you can't have static IPs on templates there. So anyway, back to here. The last thing on the switches I wanted to show you is a cool feature called Smart Ports. And what this does is it allows you to automatically detect your devices and automatically apply configuration. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to type macro auto global control. And this is going to just enable this on all switch ports automatically. So we're just going to hit enter here. Processing, I meant to say. And we're just going to make sure console is on. And I'm going to go ahead and just enable all my ports. So I have a few access points and a few phones on here. Let's give that a minute. So if I go do show CP neighbor, don't see any phones yet. Oh, there we go. So you can see that now we're getting this message here from Auto Smart Port saying it detected a Cisco phone and it's applying configuration on this port. So if we have a look at what it did here, we now have a ton of configuration. So we can see that it's gone ahead and added voice VLAN. It's went ahead and added support security and so on and so forth there. So it's done quite a lot for us. Now, if I went ahead and I turned off this port, see if it's going to behave now. Once it realizes it's down, give that a minute. But eventually when it realizes it's down, it's going to actually remove that configuration for us. And same thing with the access points. So we can see that I have an access point on port 1. So I'm just going to have a look at this guy, and we can see that this is set up with best practices for the access point. Now we can adjust this as we need to there. So for example, if I have our term shell on, we can see what this is actually doing by going show shell functions, and this actually creates a bunch of functions for us. So we can see that for the what do we got here? I'm looking for one. All right, so for digital display, our video player, you can see that if the link comes up, it's going to go ahead and apply this configuration once it's classified, and we can adjust this as we want to there. We can also, if you look at one of the phones, which is on 25, we can see that it has picked VLAN voice or voice VLAN 2 for that, and it's just using VLAN 1 for the default there, and it's doing that because I haven't actually told it anything. So we can have a look at what the defaults are by going show macro auto device, and we'll just say phone for example. So we can see that these are configured with 1 and 2. So if I just copy this here, I can change this to be whatever I want. So I'm just going to say macro auto device phone, and instead of this, we're just going to say this is going to be VLAN 100. Actually, no, I said 10 and 20. So now if I flap those phones, what we'll see when it does its job okay, so you see it's just removed the configuration, it's re-adding it. So if I look at 26 right now, not quite yet. But what we'll eventually see when CDP does its job is that it will change to the proper VLANs. So we're waiting on that. What do you guys think of that feature? Neat? Not neat?
It looks pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty handy there if you have like a highly transited environment there where you just want to plug in an access point and have it apply the configuration for you. I've seen it used in some fairly large shops there to pretty good effect. You can customize this as you want to there, and you can also do things like add MAC addresses. So you can say things like macro auto, we can say add MAC address groups. So we can say that this can be test. And from here we can say if we have like a particular kind of phone that isn't Cisco, we can just add OUIs. We can say that it's going to be something like 1111 whatever, And
what are you doing today?
what is that?
What are you doing today?
We're going over some Onbox automation there. So we covered tickle scripts already, and we covered the basics of the smart ports, which is we're just wrapping up, and then we're probably going to move on to guest shell next. So a lot of Onbox automation stuff. Should be fun. Anyway, so what we can do here is I can say something like this, and what this is going to do is just automatically I define the phone OUs there, and that, or not necessarily phones, but device OUs, and it will I can tie this to the automation there, so if it matches these particular MAC address ranges, it's just going to automatically apply the configuration for us, so we can customize this as we need to. Let me just see if... Okay, that didn't quite work, so I'm just going to say default 25. And then we'll just shut it down. And we'll turn it back on. Alright, did already. So what should happen there is, because I have changed the parameters, the VLAN should be correct when it does its detection. Yeah, there we go. So we can see that you can customize them as you need to there to suit your environment, and works pretty well. It's kind of a feature that no one really talks about there. You do need physical equipment for it there. You can't lab this with CML or anything like that there, because it doesn't really make sense to have this kind of feature in a virtual image, or at least that's my reasoning behind it, but I don't really know. But it is there. It does exist. There are some newer ways of doing it there if you have like the 9Ks, but it's the same basic principles. Alright, so that is smart ports. So next what we'll do is we'll have a look at guest shell. So guest shell is a full-blown Linux shell that lives on your router or switch, and it lets you do a number of interesting things, like using Linux utilities, and also doing full-on Python for your automation. But it is a little bit of a beast if you haven't seen the configuration before. So what I'm going to do is just set the width to be higher so we have longer commands.
Do the iOS XE devices support like Puppet?
They do. We'll probably talk about that probably after Kevin. Probably when it comes back to me, because Kelvin's going to talk about the off-box stuff there, but I doubt he's going to get into Puppet. So we'll probably, if we're still on the topic, we'll circle back on that. But you can run Puppet on iOS, long story short.
Yeah.
But anyway.
But you can't run them on, or run it on normal iOS.
No, it's iOS or Nexus.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the first thing we need to do is create a new type of port, and that is called the virtual port group. And this is to facilitate communication to the container that's going to be running. So I'm just going to call this 0. And for simplicity's sake, I am going to go ahead and add this to my management VRF, because that way I don't need to deal with NAT or whatnot to get it online. And then I'm just going to give it an IP address. And that's all I need to do here. So behind the scenes, I also have OSPF running on my management network there, so I should be able to reach the 123 network if I need to, but we'll get there when we get there. So to recap, I have just created a virtual port group and basically just give an IP address. So now what we do is we create something called app hosting, and we give it a guest ID of guest shell. Now inside here, we basically tell it what IP information that we're going to be giving the container. By the way, this is an example of what happens when you have the iOS shell enabled. You get some extra options that are otherwise not visible. So don't let that mess you up there if you're turning it on and you think that option's there when it's not normally there. But we can just start typing this out. So it's just going to be app vnic, and we're just going to give this gateway 0. We're going to tie this to the virtual port group we just made. And then we tell it the guest interface we're going to be using, and this is actually just 0 for the first interface. And then we, inside here, we give it an IP address. So I'm just going to say 123.100, and we give it a net mask. And then what we do is we give it a default gateway. And we'll give it a DNS server too. So we'll say that this is my DNS server. And let's just see what we have here. So this is highly dependent on what version of iOS XE you have there. I'm running the latest version, which is 17.4. So if you're running an older version, certain families of iOS XE have different ways of handling this. But if you're if you're relatively modern, this is the way they've kind of settled on it. But essentially what we're doing is we define the container, we tell it what IP address or what interface it's using, we give it an IP address, we give it a gateway, and then we give it DNS if we want. So with all that out of the way, what we do is we type guest shell enable. And this is going to take a minute to actually do it, but essentially what this is doing is building a container and running on essentially Docker. There is one feature that I didn't quite... here we go. I didn't quite show you there, but this requires IOX to be running, and all you do is just type IOX as it is, and that enables the process there, and this is the container engine that runs on the routers that allows us, so that needs to be turned on. So now we can just go show IOX, and we can see that this is running, and it lets us know the capabilities. We can also do show app hosting list. And we can see that we have our guest shell running, and I was doing some experimentation with web server earlier, that's why that's there. But we can see that. So if I want to enter the guest shell, I just type guest shell. And now I am on a Linux host, CentOS 8 stream to be specific on this version. And I can do pretty much anything we can on Linux. So if I want to, I could say echo test, I can create a folder if I want to, I can edit that file. So basically this is a full-blown CentOS there, but I can do anything I want.
You
Now,
install a web server.
What's that?
Yeah, you can use it. Use your switch as a web server.
Yep, among many other things. Now this is completely isolated, so if I want to break this, there is no harm in it. So if I go into root, for example, and I say delete everything, no preserve root, and we don't want to hear any complaints. So now I've just deleted everything on the operating system. So now if I type something like touch, that's not there. If I try cat, that's not there. Basically, I've ruined the container, but no worries. We just go guest shell destroy. And then when it comes back, we just build it again. So the benefit of this over some of the older iterations that Cisco did with the bash shell there is that you can do anything you want with it, and it's not going to cause any major issues there. So just turn that back on because we need to see it.
What about overloading? Is that not possible either?
Overloading, like NAT?
No, overloading the system with running scripts and so forth in the shell.
Well, the container itself, if we dive into the details, there are limits, so you can't overrun the system by default. Of course, if you find a way to run out all the storage or whatnot, you can cause issues. You do have to be somewhat careful. But if I go app hosting, and then we go detail, we can see the we can see all the resources it's using and the allocation. It's not given much, so we would have to increase it if we wanted to cause any damage here. So they do have same limits because this is just
like the lower versions where you very easily can break the switch or router.
Sure, yeah, they have some sane defaults, I'll call it there, but if you take off all the safety nets and go crazy, sure, you can cause some issues. Anyway, we'll just go guest shell. By the way, you can do guest shell exec to run commands. And this will let you do things like, what do we want to do? Touch a file. So I can run commands directly from iOS to the guest shell there without actually going into it. And likewise in the guest shell, I can do commands on the iOS. So I could say do host show IP route. And we can see we have our routes there. And if I wanted to, I could mess with this because it's just Linux. So if I wanted to, I could say sed, and we'll just say, what do I want to do? If I see 1, 2, 3, I want that to be 3, 4, 5. So you can see that I've just messed with the output there. Now, obviously that's not really useful in most cases, but you could use the powerful Linux utilities as you want to filter data if you feel it's useful to you. The main star of the show is the Python integration. So what we're going to do is just make our life a little bit easier. So we're just going to go pip, and we're going to install IPython, which is a better shell. Because this should have internet access. Maybe it doesn't. Okay, well this used to have internet access. Let me just see. Should be fine. Okay, we'll just do this real quick. I did some testing earlier, and I think I buggered a bit, so we're just going to change some IPs around a little bit. So what we're going to do is just go here. And we're just going to say that this is 10, 30, 190, why not? All right, we'll give that a try. If not, I'll just carry forward there. I was just trying to get a nicer editor for us. Alright, so I should be able to go to ping, URF management. Yeah, whatever, I'll come back to it. So, what I was going to do is pull down a nice shell there, but we'll just use the old school one. So if we go Python 3, this will launch us into the classic Python shell. So we can do things like hello world and go from there. But Cisco gave us a simple package for running things, so we can just go import CLI, and then from here I can do things like CLI.clip, and this lets me directly interact with the iOS shell from my Python scripts now. So this is basically bringing the full Python functionality to my scripts there. So if I wanted to, I could write some scripts and I could execute them, and then it would enhance some other features that we're going to be talking about next. So what we'll do is, I'm not quite sure why it's not talking there, but I'll troubleshoot that later. But for now, we're going to put a pin in guest shell. And we're going to move on to our last topic, which is EEM, or Embedded Event Manager. And what this does is it allows you to make scripts that are based on certain actions that can happen on your router. So, for example, we get in there by saying event manager applet, and we're just going to call this everything running already. Event manager, no, okay. Event manager applet, and we'll just call this more Cisco. So what we do is we tell it what event we want to run, and we can see there's a bunch of events that are built in, so we can do things based on if commands are typed, if routing is changes, if we got a syslog event, if we can do it based on timers. So very powerful tool. We can do this based on if a CDP neighbor is discovered, if we want to do automatic configuration for like descriptions and whatnot. And very powerful features. So what we'll do is we'll start with saying none, and which means what we're going to manually call this. And then what we need to do is we need to give it an action. So under action, we give it a name. And this is done in order there. So if I do action 10, then that's going to be run before action 20 and 30 and so forth. So you do want to be consistent there. You don't want to be like 10 and then do 100 because then you have an order of operations issue there, because 10 and 100 are two different things. So you always want to make sure you're consistent with like 3-digit, 4-digit numbers. So anyway, we're just going to say 10. And we're just going to do a very simple thing. So we can see we can do all kinds of stuff here. What we're going to start with is something simple. We're just going to say puts. And we're just going to say more Cisco in quotes. So with this, we're just going to end. And I'm just going to say event manager run more Cisco. And no surprises there, it writes more Cisco for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to, do I still have, okay, I got to get rid of that. Node function or Cisco. Okay. Oops, I didn't want that, I wanted this. I'll just do this for timing. Alright, so we're going to go back into our applet here. We're going to say more Cisco, and we're going to add an event. So the simplest event we can do is just based on CLI. So what this can do is when you type a command, it can intercept it and it can run the automation instead. So you can do this for a number of different things there, where you can do this to, I lost my train of thought. You can do this so you can automatically remove usernames from the show run output, or a famous one I did was that I made a post on Reddit where anytime someone did a switch port trunk allowed VLAN, it automatically adds the add button so that they don't cause an outage. But what we can do here is we tell it a pattern, and we can say anything we want here. We're just going to say more Cisco. And then we have to tell it, what do we want to do here? Do we want to skip the command, or do we want to sync it? So if I say skip the command, yes, then that means that the CLI command is not actually going to run. It's instead going to run the EM script. If I say no, it's going to run the command and run the script. So it depends on what you're trying to achieve for your script here. And then there's also sync, and we're just going to say no. And basically this just means, are we running this at the same time, or are we running this independently, or one after another? And if we're skipping, we basically have to say we're running it independently there, or it's going to give us a logic error. So now we have this in place, we're just going to go exit. And now if I type more Cisco and enable, we now see more Cisco in our output here, because it has interpreted the pattern, and we've done it there. So we can do some more interesting things now. So let's say we want to add a loopback interface. What am I doing here? So instead of doing this, we're going to have it add a loopback instead. So we're just going to say action. And you can see how there's no discrimination on the command line there. I just typed in applet more Cisco. And because it has found this in the command line, it's run this command. So you can see how dangerous this could be because I can no longer enter this applet. Because you see, it's skipped the command when I type this. So if I try this again, I can't get in there because the EEM is taking over there. So be very careful when you're running these kind of scripts there. You don't want to get yourself locked out there and have to do more drastic things to get in there. But we'll deal with that later. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create a new one. And we'll call this add loopback. So what we'll do is we'll just say event none. That looks a little bit better. And then we're just going to say action is CLI, and then we want to do a command. Now, we have to remember that just like with the tickle script, or not the tickle script, the iOS loop I did there, we have to assume that it's starting from when it first logs in. So the first command we type is enable. And then we want to just keep moving up there. So to add a loopback, we need to go to comp T. And then we need to go to our loopback. Just pick a random number there. And remember, we're always increasing the sequence number here so that it knows the order to run these events. And then we'll just give this an IP address. We'll say action like so. And the last thing we'll do is just give it a description. We'll call this more Cisco. Alright, so when we're done, we can just say action end and then exit this. Oh, actually, I didn't need end there. That was for if I was doing a loop, so let's just go. Yeah, it took it out for me. No, it didn't. It's just not going to do anything, so I'm just going to clean that up. What I meant to say was, oh, it's X out, it doesn't really matter. So at this point, all I can do or need to do is go applet or manager run add loopback. And we should now have loopback 111. So this is now the preferred way of doing destructive changes that I showed you the tickle script earlier. So if I wanted to do something drastic there, what I'll often do is I'll write an EEM script like this, and I'll put in all my changes, and then I'll run the EEM script when I'm done, and it's not going to disconnect me from the router because it's not going to cause any issues here. So for example, let's just change this a little bit. Let's go action 60 is going to be interface gig 1, and we're going to shut it down. And then we're going to no shut it. Actually, first what we'll do is we'll just say repeat 100 times. And then we'll say no shot. Actually, we'll say 20 times, and we'll something that doesn't exist. There we go. Alright, so if we follow the plot here, what we're going to do is I am SSH'd into this guy, and we're going to run the script that is going to, at the loopback, is going to shut off my SSH interface, and then after, actually fix this guy here, but after it does a ping, it's going to no shut it there, and it should let me back into the interface if everything works out. But I forgot we're running this from command lines, so, or from the configure, so we need to do the do command. Like so. Alright, so if I try this, we can go event manager run add loopback. And what we'll see is the interface is down, so of course I'm disconnected here. And after 20-30 seconds or so, what we should see is that I'm able to SSH into the interface again, because this should come back up. Do, 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 do. Looks like something might have went wrong there. Let's try this a different way. Let's just go. I don't think it likes the do command actually. So we're going to say is action 80 is going to be wait, and we're just going to say 1 minute, which is a better way of doing it anyway. So what we did is we've changed we shut down the interface, we've added a wait, and then we should have a no shut afterwards. So we're just going to turn that interface back on. And did I enable that debug? I thought I did. Action. CLI. Okay. Alright, take two. We're going to say manage, run, add, loopback. And if everything works out, we should see the interface come up. I may need to make a couple edits there, so this is why you always want to test the stuff out before you do it in prime time. But any questions while we're waiting?
What's your favorite soft drink?
I'm going to have to say rum.
Aye. Very.
That's a Scott. I'd say Iron Brew has to be my favorite. Oh, it's really hard to find in Canada, so I don't get it all that often. Alright, last try. I'm just going to make this explicit and then we'll move on. So what I'm going to do is just make sure that we're explicitly where we want to be. So we're just going to say we'll say 81. And notice the sequence numbers there. I don't remove commands. I just rewrite the sequence number. And then we'll just say that we're going here again. All right, last try here. But the moral of the story is that the idea is that we want to be able to flap the interface there, and this is useful for more destructive testing. Don't know why we're having a quirk here, but it wouldn't be a live demo if we didn't. So, try this one last try. Bit manager, run, and loopback. What's that?
What was the thing you were filtering on in the script?
Oh, event. Are you talking about that? Oh. Are you talking about?
Interface, gigabit one, yes.
Yep. So I think what was going on there is that it got lost when I did the wait, so I just explicitly added the interface. So we'll see if that works out. All right, well, we'll move on and we'll come back to that later. Seems I'm having some issues with my router today. But anyway, the point of the story was that we were supposed to have this come back up. So, and then the idea was that if you're doing some, like change an IP address on a router or something like that, you could use that to update that without causing any grief there. I think I might actually need to reboot my router before we move on to the next thing because I was having some issues with the virtual group as well. So we'll play that by ear. But anyway, let's just move on. Let's move on to some more interesting things. So if I go show event manager, we can see detectors, and this tells us how we can use the various things there. We already use CLI. What we're going to do instead is look at routing. And if I go detail, it's going to give us a long list of all the different variables and stuff we can use so that we can write our scripts effectively. So what we're going to do is just say event manager, and we're going to call this we're going to call this routes added. Oh, applet. And for the event, we're going to pick routing. And from here, we can tell it how we want to match the prefixes. So we're just going to say that we want to match a network. And I want to be alerted anytime a new route is added. So we're just going to say all zeros. And then less than 32. This is just like how we do a prefix list. And then we want the type to be add. So anytime a route is added, it's going to trigger this event. So what we're going to do is just we're going to keep it nice and simple for right now. We're just going to say puts and we'll just keep it simple right now and just say route added. Alright, so now we have a very basic script that's just going to say route added every time we add a route. So on my other router, am I connected? Yes, I am. Okay. On my other router, we have OSPF running. Maybe we don't. We have EIGRP running. Okay. And what we're just going to do is we're just going to say loopback 111 or 2 1 20 whatever. Okay. So what we should see if we go over here is we got to notice that route added. Because if we look, we have the 20 route here. So this isn't all that useful because it's just letting us know that something happened. So we can add more detail to what we're going to do. And if you remember, if I go all the way up here, it's going to give us a bunch of variables that we can reference. So we could add all these into our script to get more detail. So for example, we could say something like the routing network. So let's go back into our script here. And we're just going to say like so. So we're going to exit it so it's live. And now we're just going to say 21. Pick a new IP. Okay, so that is definitely not going the way I want it to. Let me just copy. Route added. And let's also add routing prefix. All right, let's just try that again. All right, so we're gonna just add a new interface. Actually, we're just gonna say new IP. It doesn't really matter. Okay, tell you what, I'm gonna reboot this router. It's not quite adding the way or working the way it should. So it's down for a couple minutes. Any questions about anything we've seen? Okay. Yeah, so the EEM is very useful when it's functioning correctly. I think I broke the router when I was doing some pre-staging stuff, but we'll see if it comes back properly after this. But the idea here is that we can do have the router make corrective action. So if it receives a syslog that say the OSPF goes down, then we can have it automatically flap the interfaces for us so that we can try and do some basic troubleshooting. I use it a lot when we get to things like 4G sticks there, so we might have it automatically kick in the 4G connection when the loss of the routing table happens, or a loss in the routing table, or an interface goes down, that kind of thing, so that we're only using the cellular when we need to.
I've seen a dual WAN setup once where they used it to clear the NAT tables.
Yeah, those are the kind of things where it's really cool because it can do some local actions for you without you having to get involved there, and it's a good way of saving money if there's a lot of LAN costs or that kind of thing. So this is almost back up there. We'll see if it's behaving properly.
I heard a Cisco podcast once. The guy was talking about how he used a router on a telephone pole and hooked a wire and ran it down with some kind of a sensor onto the ground to detect when the water rised and flooded, which would cause the link to close, and thus the interface with the line would go up.
Oh, there you go.
The EM script. Yeah.
That's a cool use actually.
I was like, wow. But, yeah.
Alright, first of all, let me just see if guest shell is behaving, because I need that to be for later. Okay, now it's behaving, so let me just finish my thought I was doing earlier there. Sorry for the mix up there, but we'll just go IPython is what I was going to do. And what this is it's a more fancy shell for. Are you still not online? You pinged. Oh, I know why. Because my firewall is angry at it. Anyway, back to the task at hand. So, do we have our routing working? Okay. Let's just see if this works out of the box, and then we'll finish our thought there. Because I was gonna, with how I was gonna close this out, I was going to, I'm gonna need the internet access for the shell there. So we'll see if that works. So. Still not behaving properly there. Let me just... try this one last time. So we're going to say... Oops. That didn't work out, did it? Might be having an AK thing. Let me just try this one. One last try. Do show event manager detector routing detailed. Alright, let's see what that does. Just bear with me for 1 second. Alright, here's what we'll do. We're going to say 00 set message, and then we're going to say route. Action 010 puts message. Something like that. Okay. Now we're just going to try this one more time. Okay, so for whatever reason on this version, I'm having an oddity with the variables that should be working. Let me just try this real quick. How about on my There we go. So apparently there's a weird plot or bug I have. I wasn't expecting, but that's fine. So that's why it's always good to have various gear around when you're testing this kind of stuff. So let me just copy this as is. And let me just delete this. And paste it in. Weird. Anyway, we'll just finish up with this guy there, and then I just won't do what I was going to do earlier. I'll have to do that another time. So anyway, let's just fix up what we have here. So what I wanted to do before we got sidetracked was I wanted to get this more information. So if we look up here, we have received the where did I see that? We have route added, but we don't have the rest of the information. So we're going to add the prefix. And we're going to do that by going here, and then we're going to add the prefix length. Oops. So all we do is just add a slash like we would, and then we'll just add prefix length. And if I go end, now we should have the actual subnet. So I'm going to go ahead and I think that's the loopback I used, right? Yep. So we're going to say no shut. All right, so now we see that we have that there. We can add more details if we want to. So we'll go back. And we can keep building this out. So we can say something like has been added via, and let's just say the routing protocol. That's why you do term width, by the way, there, so the long commands don't get cut off. And then we'll just say end, and we'll go back to our loopback and change the IP. Now the reason why it's ignoring the mask is, or the reason why we see it twice there is because I'm doing it through a connected route and just adding the loopback. So we see we have the /24, which is what we expect, but we also have our local route, the /32, so that's why we're seeing it twice here. But we can see that this is working. We can amend this a little bit, so we can just say we will get rid of this. And we'll get rid of this. And this is actually why the probably the EM script was messing up earlier there, is because of the oddity going on the 8K platform. So we can try that real quick on the end if we care. But we have a nice clean script here. So we have it so that if it is adding a route, it's going to notify us. And then we're going to amend it so that it tells us if we remove a route. So we're just going to say removed. Instead of add, this is going to be remove. And then we can say has been removed. So we'll end. We'll go back to our loopback here. And we'll say shut. And now it's saying that it's being removed. If I add this back in, saying it's connected there. So you can see that we can do all kinds of fun stuff here. We'll do one last example and then we'll wrap it up. So the other thing we can do is if we look at, we have OSPF here. So if I do clear IP OSPF process, ooh, our EM script is really working there. But what we want to see is we'll just grab this down. So we're just going to say one last one, manage applet OSPF down. And we're going to say event is going to be syslog. And we're going to do a pattern. And we can do a regex here to find what we want. I'm just going to say that we're going to say, I don't know why I copied down. I should have copied. This, so we'll just say that. So what we're basically saying here is if we see an OSPF down message, we're going to do something. And then we're going to say action 010. It's going to be CLI command. Like so. And what we'll do is we will shut this interface. Don't forget your quotes when you need it. You're fine if single word, but if there's multiple words, you need a quote. And then we'll say, no, this is not helping my command line here. Alright, so if I type that right, what we should have is if OSPF flaps, we should shut down the interface, and this would be practically if maybe the only way through the out of the network is through OSPF there, and you just want to shut down the interface so routing doesn't continue. So let's just try this out. We've had some up and down luck so far. So we're just going to go clear. And I'm going to not repeat my mistake here. I'm going to delete these guys. I got to change that shortcut key. All right, no. All right, so right now I have OSPF working. I'm going to go do clear IP OSPF process. And we can see that we have shut down our interface because of the EEM there. So that is basically the Onbox automation I was going to show you there. I was going to go a step further and show you chat ops, but we've had some unexpected behavior with the new routers, and I'm guessing it's just something on the code base. They probably changed the variable values, and I'm not getting the output I want, so we kind of wasted a bunch of time there, but at the very least it's good to see troubleshooting, so who knows, maybe it's still useful. But other than that, if we look at, actually we'll just wrap this out just for closure's sake. So we have this shut down. So what we're going to do is we're just going to amend our script a little bit to have it do the flap that we tried before there, because there's definitely something going on there. So we're just going to say that we're going to shut it down, and then action is we're going to wait 1 minute, and then action 60 is going to be no shut. CLI command no shut. so we're going to unflap it so we can see the whole deal. And we're going to turn off smart ports because that will go nuts. So we're going to say auto, global, processing. All right, so we're going to go ahead and make sure it's up. I thought Cool. All right, so now we're going to clear OSPF again. And we see it goes down, and after a minute, if this works properly, this should work right. And this is basically what I was trying to do with the flapping of the other interface there, but something's changed in the new code apparently, or at least the 8Ks, and I'll have to lab that out later out of curiosity. So any last questions about everything we've seen today? We'll probably wrap it up after we get the confirmation on this one way or another. No? No questions at all?
That's pretty clear. Yeah.
Alright. Probably should have put a timer there. I don't know if it's still running. Alright. One last attempt here. I think what we're going to do is just going to say...
Yeah, we switched over to summertime last night.
Oh yeah?
So it's 1 hour shorter day today.
Good times?
I was
Good.
speaking to Trevor last night, so I was talking to him. It was getting late and I should go to bed, and I eventually woke up and I figured out that I missed another hour.
And
That's only for a week though, because we went ahead a week earlier.
Actually,
Yeah, it's weird with Amsterdam. You guys are normally you're 6 hours ahead of me, but there's a period where it's like 7 hours or 5 hours. I forget.
Alright. So waiting 60 seconds.
1 hour jump to the syslog file.
Yeah, it's not an entirely big deal, but you guys get the syntax there. Just gonna curious why it's not working. Abnormal access status, so it's crashing. Time limit. Is there a time limit on here? Is that our problem? Well, the easiest way to fix that without troubleshooting is to change the time. Yeah. Okay. So there's I forgot about there's a sanity check there where it limits the time by default. So what I did is just lowered it so that it doesn't hit the 20 seconds. That's why that particular one was causing us grief. To fix that, if you care, that would be. What's it called? Oh, it must be a phone. That's the July E. I think it's in the global. Let me just do it quick. Oh, the max run timer. That's right. It's done on the event, so that would be.
You set that after the naming of the event manager, the naming of it, then you can set maximum runtime.
Yeah, I forgot about the max run attribute for a bit. I
Yeah.
need to tea after this, but basically the issue was when I set this, there's an attribute that I overlooked, and that's the max run. And here's where we can say how long it can actually run. So if I would pick something sane, like, I don't know, 5 minutes. And now if I went 60 again, and then we did this one last time, this would work fine. So that's that was the issue with the flapping there. So make sure you do the max run properly if you're doing it in the real world for that kind of thing there. But generally speaking, if you're talking about a flap on an interface, you don't actually want it down for a full minute. That's a little bit excessive unless you just want to. Usually, you just turn it off and you leave it.
The commands is also very different between the different event manager versions if you go deep into it.
For the most part, they're fine. They have the same idea. What you'll find is the detectors. Yeah. Like if I do show event manager detector, these will be different if you compared this to like the new version that I was working with. They might have the same.
For tracking stuff, and in some versions you can't track them. You need to use IPSLA. There's a slightly.
Yeah, like there's IPSLA, and I bet if I check the switch, it hasn't actually, but.
I don't think in 3750 you can actually do tracking. You need to reduce IPSLA. From newer with 3850 you can do that tracking.
Yeah, let me just see if there's a quick answer here. Actually, we can do this. Actually, no, we can't. Track. Yeah, there we go. Track is missing. So, for example.
Do that in older versions. You can do tracking.
Yeah, but anyway, long story short is the newer versions will obviously have more things to do.
Yeah.
I'll have to look offline why the variables doesn't work, because I was going to do a chat ops thing, and maybe I'll just do that after Calvin does his stuff there as kind of like a wrap up kind of thing, because then we can do the more advanced version. But you can, before I got sidetracked there by the bug, you can run the Python scripts you write in the guest shell with Event Manager, so you can use Python to execute your things rather than doing the more restrictive EEM syntax, because it can be a little bit annoying when you're typing out everything. So anyway, this worked just fine. So it was just the max run. So I just drew a blank there. But yeah, we covered a lot. We talked about templates. We talked about iOS SH. We talked about EEM and guest shell, and we did some examples there. So oh no, not too bad for a Sunday session. There we go. I can talk English sometimes. I don't know. Alright, so I will basically do what I did last week there. I'm just going to take this stream as is and dump it on my YouTube. So you guys can check it out later if you want to.
Awesome, yeah.
Otherwise, Kelvin is going to be presumably doing the Offbox stuff there. So he's going to start introducing like the APIs and how to work with the router without doing the guest shell and that kind of thing. So that should be fun. And then if we carry on this stream, we'll just keep talking about the different kind of emerging technologies that are covered in like the DevNet kind of associate kind of thing. So it should be good times.
Thanks very much.
All right, guys. I'll talk to you later.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm out to bed. It's almost, it's 11 o'clock. So yeah.
Oof. All right. See you, bud. Just before I upload this, I took another crack at the 8K EEM, and I found the issue was that you have to terminate the strings in a certain way. So if you want to reference a variable, you still have your single quotes for everything, but you also need to put the variables inside a single quote. And then if you want to add the other variable, you add it here or there. So you need the double quotes if you want to have text, and you need the single quotes for the variables. Now what I noticed is that this actually works fine, but if I do a show run sec event, we can see that it doesn't actually save the strings there, so it's loaded properly at this point there, but if I was to copy and paste this would have the same issues there. So you have to, it's kind of like when you add a question mark into the configuration there, you have to be a bit careful of how you work with it there, and I suspect this is the same way. I don't know if this is going to fix this going on or if this is how they always wanted it to be, but anyway, that's the answer.